We can't teach our kids that this is a uniquely disastrous world. We can't. It's false. Hey there, friends, families, fans, and foes of Dad Saves America. John Popola here, and I am actually on my way to my son's high school graduation today as we probably release this, but I thought I'd record one of these videos in advance so that you could fill your day and your weekend with some interesting nonsense. I want to look at some of the comments from our climate change video, which was actually a section of a broader piece, that was released about the reasons to have more kids and pushing back on the narratives that have been really, frankly, scaring our kids into having a familyless future, which I find to be, frankly, evil. Okay, at RevDope1 writes, YouTube makes a fool of itself with those blue comments, propaganda, they put below videos. Am I bothered by those? Kinda. Do I think anybody's paying attention? I want to say not, but I'd love to hear if you find those to be important and useful. This guy must be getting paid by the oil companies. Most of what he said is untrue. Okay, we don't get money from any companies. I don't get money from oil companies. We are a nonprofit. We do have donors across lots of industries. I have no problem taking money from people who've made their wealth producing energy for people. No problem with that at all. I happen to think that producing energy is really important for human thriving. I care principally about human thriving in the context of being smart, reasonable stewards of the rest of life on Earth. Here's the problem when you do the ad hominem thing, when you do the guilt by association thing. Most of what he said is untrue. You couldn't leave one example of what I laid out here that's not true? I'd like that. There's other comments that are actually pretty interesting about what's happened with coral and that maybe there is coral growth, but a lot of it's new growth and it's been bleached. That's more interesting. That's a comment that really cares. Have we as an organization gotten donations from people who've made money in oil? Yes. Have at me. I'm going to mispronounce this username. Alex Pervanoglu 7420. I have 2 adult children. They have said they don't want children of their own. Not due to the climate change lie, but because of the disgusting and evil world that they see being created. This is a comment that could come from right-wingers and left-wingers alike, frankly. Like, what makes our world disgusting and evil? Is it the horrors of capitalism and colonialism? Is it the horrors of communism and woke identity politics? Pick your disgusting and evil, and you can sort of apply it into this comment. My meta comment for this is that the world has always been a mess. This is one of the things that I think fundamentally we used to learn as a matter of course, because life was a lot harder than it is now for most people. Like, the world is always a disaster. Is the world today really worse than it was in 1824 when half of new births resulted in early death? I think not. Is the world worse today than in the era of Jim Crow in 1954, where the police are hosing down peaceful black protesters in the streets of Alabama? I think not. I know people in a lot of the comment section is basically saying you're a Panglossian, you think the glass is half full, look around. I'm just here to say the world has always been a mix of beauty and catastrophe. And what are you going to do about that? You got to live your life. This is not a uniquely horrible time. It's not. It's difficult in unique ways, but they are not uniquely horrible. We can't teach our kids that this is a uniquely disastrous world. We can't. It's false. Here's an interesting comment. This is from Nick Cooper, 1260. I am convinced humans think the planet is their possession. I remember when I was working at Nickelodeon, I had this really awesome office. We were on like the 44th floor at 1515 Broadway. So this is right in Times Square. You saw the Hudson River. You saw the whole of downtown. It was like amazing. I remember looking out and thinking at different times, like, what have we done? We've paved this beautiful world in concrete. There is something difficult and unsettling about the idea that it falls on us as creatures to essentially have dominion over the entire planet. Because what is nature? Nature is all of life, including humanity. The challenge we face is that we have no choice. We are the smartest, the most adaptable, the most inventive. So we are the dominant being on this planet. And we will either be good stewards of this planet or we will be poachers of the planet. And a lot of the comments below this video seem to have either accidentally or intentionally misunderstood the things I said about that we have to actually be good stewards of the resources of the living creatures in this planet. And I take that very seriously. I think one of the problems with the climate catastrophe hyperbolics and hysterics is they completely crowd out all the other things that we can and must balance as we progress through this messy, crazy process of being alive and trying to do better for ourselves and our families and our communities and our country. We have to balance a lot of different variables, a lot of different inputs. And one of them is, how do we make the world better for as many living things, not just humans, as possible? I made a film with my wife called At the Fork, and it's about the way animals, land animals primarily, are raised for food. Working actually in collaboration with the Humane Society of the United States and Whole Foods Market. You could say, oh, that's some lefty, crunchy nonsense, animal lover stuff. Be my guest to believe that. We traveled the country, talked to farmers of all different sizes. I think it's the least judgmental attempt to look at the morality of raising animals for food I've ever seen. And that was on purpose, which is of course why it didn't wildly succeed. I should have said, it's all a bunch of evil conspiracy or cowspiracy or whatever, and we would have gotten a lot more box office success, to be perfectly honest. Instead, it was like, oh, farmers in this country are and have always just been trying to do the best they can to produce more food using fewer resources, because producing more with less is how you improve your profit margins, improve your productivity, and stay in business. It's the essential conservation mechanism baked into the profit and loss statement, because in business, your costs aren't a benefit. And yes, you could try to externalize your costs and dump your pollution into the river and let the runoff from your cattle operation dump down into the Mississippi and cause blooms in the Gulf that kill off all the sea life. That's actually happening. We talk about these things. These are examples of the problems that have nothing to do with CO2 that we could be addressing even more effectively if we didn't waste so much energy focusing on the plant food we put in the air. But the fact is, we do have dominion over the animals, and it is up to us individually and as a society to be stewards of them and to care about whether they suffer or not at our hands. I'll give you one other example. I know I'm kind of running on too long here, but there's been multiple studies and multiple examples when it comes to wild animal preservation that ownership works. Actually, in countries including Zimbabwe, they have legalized the ownership of elephants, and in some cases rhinos, because in the absence of anyone having skin in the game of keeping the rhinos or the elephants around, you get horrendous poaching for things as simple as their tusks or their horns. The solution, it turns out, looks a little like farming, which is give people the ability to own and frankly exploit the animals. And so Zimbabwe allows private ownership, or at least it used to, of elephants, and it saw their elephant populations recover, which makes sense, right? Because one thing we don't have any shortage of is chickens and cows and pigs, because there's a reason to keep them around. The fact is, people want things, and the goal of institutions should be to try to channel human nature into healthy, productive action instead of predatory action and crooked cronyism and poaching. That is what adult public policy should be about. That is what adult environmentalism should be about. How do we, given what humans are, channel our energies into the most productive thing we can be? And that is all I'm saying when it comes to the issue surrounding climate. We're not doing that in the public discourse. We're making up nonsense and trying to scare our kids into not having kids. And the people who are doing it the most have some pretty crazy sounding ideas that sound an awful lot like the eugenicists of the 1920s and 30s. And they call themselves biologists, and they technically are. But the biology they seem to care about most isn't humans. Let's keep going. This is from Christopher Langen, 4701. I'm a geography professor. This video is going to be suggested viewing from my quick 4-week environmental science class starting in just over a week. Oh my gosh, this is why I wake up in the morning, comments like this. This perspective is exactly what I teach my students, and I know this perspective at universities is typically not shared by most professors, but this is absolutely fantastic. Thank you. First of all, Christopher, thank you for leaving that comment. I really was just trying to do my best to get this stuff right. I would love to hear how your students respond. Because one of the things that's also so hard about the discourse here is that this catastrophe narrative has become essentially religious. I don't know how effectively making arguments is for changing anybody's mind. But if nothing else, I do stuff like this because I'm hoping someone like you find it useful and make it part of a broader conversation with your students or with your kids, and pick it apart and have at me. This is great. This is what we're here to do. Man, what a blessing. That's just awesome. Let's see, what else do we got here? I think I'll go with the climate scientists and the experts on how things are going climate-wise, rather than the opinion of Dad Saves America, laughing smiley faces, polar bear felly. Well, that's fair. Who the hell am I? You don't have to believe anything I say. I'm like some producer guy that cares about trying to raise kids that can stand on their own 2 feet and go out and live in a free society and want to keep it. That's what I am. So I am a curious adult with rational faculties that gets things wrong all the time, and you can take it or leave it. I tried to bring together the best material I could. I was certainly subject to the confirmation bias of my own broader beliefs, which I couldn't capture entirely in 20 minutes. But I think what you'll find is science doesn't work on the basis of consensus. That's not what science is or how it works. An appeal to authority is not science either. So I am just as capable of making a correct argument as you are, as a scientist is, because that's what we have as having logical, rational faculties. It's why, for example, juries of our peers work. We don't pack juries with criminologists. We pack juries, even in complex cases, with normal people, because every human being has the power to be rational. We're not always very good at it, but we have it. And when there's a logical fallacy baked into fundamental arguments, any one of us can catch it. I can catch it. You can catch it. And so that's all I can say about that. If you don't like that I'm weighing in on things, I'm not sure why you watched to the end or left a comment. I love this comment from Dorothy Van. Wow, just wow. So off the mark, and yet he seems like a nice, personable fella. Misinformed and totally off base. Discussing things he hasn't researched enough and doesn't have the knowledge to discuss. Well, I appreciate the humanity, my friend. And maybe you're right. I'm doing my best here. That's all I can do.